Welcome back to Legacy Gardens. Today we're going to be making rose jellies. First things first, we need to cut our roses. Next we need to remove the petals from our roses. When you do so, you want to remove the little white part at the end of the rose, a petal like that. I've heard it can make your jelly better, so as precaution, I take the time to remove those. Alright, now you take your 2 cups of petals and you're going to put them in a heat-safe jar, something that you can put boiling water in without destroying that. I'm using a half-gallon mason jar. So you just put them in there. Then you're going to take your boiling water. You want 2.5 cups boiling water and pour it over top of it. And by doing this, you're basically making a rose petal tea. And you just want to make sure everything's in the water. And then you're going to let this sit 12 to 24 hours. Once it's cool enough, you're going to want to put it in the refrigerator and let it sit there until you're ready to use it. So tonight we're going to be making rose jelly. It's made from rose petals to make a tea, and like my other flower jellies to make a tea, and they make a jelly from that tea. So this is my ball canner, electric canner. I'll put a link below if you're interested in one of these. I like to use this especially when I'm doing my jelly making, because I can take the canning off the stove, because I'll need the stove for making jelly, so it's not so much heat off one spot. It just frees up my stove, and it works great on the counter. Again, I'll put this in a link where you can find one of these situations. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to fill this with water. Like anytime you can, you want to keep your jars off the bottom of whatever you're cooking in. So whether it's on the stove, in your canner, in your pot, or this electric canner, you want to keep it off the bottom of what you're going to be canning them in, so you don't break the jars. Now, I would normally just use this or use this, but this is nice and you can lift them all at the same time. But the problem is with this canner, it has this faucet here so it doesn't sit straight. So I use most of these in this. So this one I set right here, and then I just set this on top of that, and that gives me the clearance where it sits straight. So again, the first thing we're going to do is fill this up with water. You always fill your electric canner or any pot before you turn it on with water, so you don't scorch the bottom. So that's what we're going to do first. Alright, so that should be good for getting started. So I'm going to go ahead and start getting that starting to warm up. These are the jars I'm going to be using for my rose jelly. These are 4-ounce jelly jars. I'm going to be making a smaller batch of this flower jelly. I did my lilac have my dandelion in a bigger batch. And this one I'm going to do the smaller batch. You can use these recipes for, like, if you have a lot of rose petals, you can do a bigger batch. Or if you have a smaller amount of, you know, the other flower jellies, you can do the smaller batch. We're going to do the smaller batch today. Just because I have one rose bush, and so I only get so many petals. But it's really good. And the other thing, too, I'm using the smaller jars because it's a really nice, like, Christmas present. To get a little jar of rose jelly, which is not very common. So what you want to do is you want to take your jelly jars, whatever size you're going to use, make sure they're really clean inside, so wash them with hot soapy water. Make sure there's no cracks in the bottom, any cracks or chips, and make sure there's no chips on the top here. You want this rim to be completely smooth, so they'll make a good seal when you're ready to seal it. So we're going to wash these, fill them with water, and put them in the canner. Okay, so the recipe says it makes about 4 cups. So I got 8 4-ounce jars, so that would be roughly 4 cups worth of jars. So, and if I need to, I can fill another jar to throw in the refrigerator if I have any left over. So this should be good. I'm gonna get these warm. I'm gonna put these in here, let this get nice and hot, and sterilize these jars while we do the rest of the stuff. Alright, so the next thing that you want to get around is your lids and rings. So I need 8 lids and 8 rings. To get these ready, you want to make sure you wash them and make sure your rings have no dents and are not rusty. The thing with the rings is that when you can your food, you don't want to leave the rings on after they're cool and sealed. You take them off, so you reuse these all the time. When it comes to lids, you really don't want to use them more than once. I do use my extra lids for like after I use them once, I wash them up, and I'll use them for like canning like dried things, like my dried beans or whatever that doesn't have to have a seal anymore. And I have used like every type of lid under the sun. I've used ball, I used these clinger, I've used like discounted ones, and they've all worked fine for me. So whatever, and like right now it's hard to be choosy because things are hard to find right now. So tonight we'll be using these cleaners. So anyways, what I like to do is wash my lids and my rings, and then just stick them together in a bowl, and then I'll pour boiling water over those to help sterilize those. I don't always sterilize my lids, like if I'm doing tomatoes or putting them in a pressure canner. They have to get so hot that I'm not too concerned about it. But when it comes to jelly, it only processes for a short amount of time. So I like to make sure it's sterilized just to be on the safe side. So got those in a bowl, and I'm going to get some water boiling. Cover it up to some boiling water. Alright. I'll set that aside. Okay. Alright. So we got our measuring cup. We got our strainer. Here is our petals and water that was sitting in the refrigerator for since yesterday. Okay. So here we go. And I'll go ahead and pour this out. Okay. So then we're just going to kind of squeeze out the petals to get all the juice out of there. Alright, so there's all our petals. As you can see, they're not like the bright red anymore. They're translucent, so all the color and goodness has come out of those. Oops. So we'll go ahead and throw that away. Okay, let me strain that. Alright, now the recipe says need about 2 1/4, and I have about 2 1/3, which should be just fine. So there it is. It's a nice dark purpley color. Now, depending on what kind of rose petal, you can use any rose petals for this. And the key is when you're using any kind of flowers, you want to make sure that they're not like you don't get them from the florists because they spray them with stuff. These were in our yard. They haven't been sprayed on anything. You know, just make sure you know where they come from, that they haven't been sprayed with pesticides or anything, and all that. It doesn't matter what color. All roses are edible. Mine were a nice, beautiful red color, and I got this dark purple. And that will probably change a little bit when we put the lemon juice in. So I'm going to go ahead and take this and put it in my pot, and then we'll measure out the lemon juice. So 1/4 cup of lemon juice. When you're making the flowered jellies, you have to use lemon juice because you're just using like a tea. There's no fruit in it, which fruit naturally has pectin and stuff in it, but the petals that you use for jelly doesn't. 1/4 cup. Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to set this aside. Okay, and then the next thing I want to talk about is our pectin. So tonight I'll be using Mrs. Wager's pectin. I also use Sure Jell pectin, and they both work fine. The trick to using pectin is to make sure you read the instructions. Okay, and fruit pectin, don't think it's like some weird chemical. I think they get this from fruit. I think generally they get it from like apples. Apples have a lot of it in that skin. And it just makes it an easier way to make jam. So you need pectin, and the biggest thing, even if you're following the recipe, to always check your pectin recipe. It always comes with the recipe. Make sure you take the time to read your pectin recipe. Okay, so right here it has cooked jelly and jam instructions with, and it tells you exactly how to use it, when to put it in, and all that stuff. Okay, you always want to make sure of that because sometimes it might fluctuate. The dried pectin is all pretty much the same, so if you're using like a box dried pectin, you can probably just follow this, but double check. There's also a liquid pectin, and you gotta put that in a different time when you're making your jam. So just make sure you look at your instructions and know when to put the pectin in. Otherwise, it will not set up. You also need to be careful about how long you need to cook it for. If you don't cook it long enough or you cook it too long, it will not set. So make sure you always double check your cook times and all that. I will do it as according to my instructions, which is most box pectin, but just always double check. Yeah, I think that's all I had to say about that. So, pectin recipe, our thing of pectin. I'll put that over the stove, by the stove, and we'll put that in together. Okay. One more thing before we head to the stove is we need to measure out our sugar. You measure sugar separately in a bowl because you have to, especially the box pectin, you have to put it in all at once after the juice starts boiling. So we're going to go ahead and measure this and put it in a bowl. Now, jam generally uses a lot of sugar. For our recipe, it's going to take 4 cups of sugar. It is a lot, But you remember, you don't use a lot of jam at one time. Like, you're talking like a half a teaspoon, you know, tablespoon at most. You know, there are some pectins you can use that you can use less sugar or no sugar. I personally haven't used those yet, and I don't know if you could do that with a like a flour jelly. I don't know, but someone out there might have tried. But for our purposes, we are just doing the regular sugar, full sugar recipes. We go through a lot of jam at my house with 4 kids, so. And the flour jams are really fun. They got kind of like a English tea feel to them. Okay, so we need 4 cups of sugar. And it doesn't matter what kind of sugar you use. I mean, some people are really finicky. I just get what I can afford. And that right now is that brand, which is the cheapest brand I can find right now. So. Alright, I'm gonna go put this by the stove and then we'll get started on the next step. Okay, so here is our rose tea. We're gonna go ahead and add our lemon juice. Okay. Okay. And as you can see, it changed the color a little bit, so it's a little more red color. And then the next step, using the dry pectin, following the pectin recipe, okay, we're gonna sprinkle this in and stir it in, and we're gonna heat this up to a boil. Okay. And then once it reaches a boil, we will add our sugar. Okay, and I'm gonna put it on like a medium high. So the thing about jam is you don't really want to walk away from it. You want to keep it moving, especially after you put your sugar in, because you don't want that sugar to scorch or to overcook your pectin. So you gotta kind of babysit this, which is why I usually do my jam making after the kids are down for bed. Otherwise, they tend to get me distracted. So right now we're just working on getting this pectin dissolved. And bringing this to a boil. Alright, now we're boiling, can't stir it down. So now we're going to add all our sugar at once. So we're going to stir that in. And we're going to bring this to a boil again. Once it comes to a boil where you can't stir it down again, you're going to boil it for 1 minute. Alright, so I can't stir down the bubbles no more, so I'm going to set my timer for 1 minute. Keep stirring. And take it right off the heat. Alright. Now we're going to take our jars out of the canner. Going to get nice and warm. So, because it's a smaller batch and it's hard to get, you kind of spread it out, spread the load a little more. Okay, so now you're just going to ladle that into the jars. Now you want about 1/4 of an inch from the lip of a jar to the top of the jelly. There's a tool for that, but I had one and it broke and I just never replaced it. So I just eyeball it. This is turning out to be a beautiful red color. That red rose. This one. Alright. Now, the next important thing to do is we gotta get the rims cleaned off really good. Don't let no jelly or any debris right here on the rim. Oh shoot, is that chip in it? Okay, now you want to just go finger tight. Okay, you don't want to do it too tight, and then your lids might buckle. Because the air has to be able to escape, so you just finger tight. It's really, really hot. We're just going to put them in our hot water bath carefully. That bubbling's okay, as some of the air escaping. You want that, because as it heats up, the air escapes, and then when it cools off and it's done, that lid will suck right down as the air inside gets cooler and condenses. So that's the process to getting those jars to seal. Okay, make sure they're falling over. Okay. You really don't, you want to try and keep them from touching each other so they don't rattle against each other, but sometimes they move on you. Okay. Now we'll put the lid on. Oh wait. Okay, so this jar is out of water, so we gotta fill this up above this jar here. It has to be above. Okay, so the water is above that last jar. You want it about 1 inch to 2 inches. And then we just gotta bring this up to a rolling boil with the big bubbles, and then you start your time. So for the jelly, you want it to boil for about 5 minutes, and that's at less than 1,000 feet altitude. And then for your altitude, you need to adjust that accordingly. Your pectin will have instructions on that. We're at 800 feet, so I go by the 5 minutes. But that is from the time it starts to boil, like rolling boil, the big bubbles where it's rolling. That's when you start your time for 5 minutes. So now we just gotta wait for it to come to a boil. It's gonna take a little bit longer because we had to add some water to it. So I will see you when that is done. Alright, 5 minutes is up. Turn the heat off. Take the lid off. Carefully lift these out. The clicking sounds a good sign. One thing too, don't worry about the water. Like there's water on top, don't worry about that. It'll dehydrate. It'll dry off. It'll evaporate. No big deal. Okay. And there we go. There is our batch of rose jelly. We'll check it in the morning, make sure everything's sealed. So we'll let it sit for tonight. And then we'll check it in the morning. You want them to sit for 12 to 24 hours before you mess with them. Make sure everything's cool and sealed good. So yeah. And this one I didn't put in the water bath. That will be going in the refrigerator. So there we go. Alright, it's the next morning and they have all sealed, which is good. And so we're just going to take the rings off before you want to store them. The best way to tell if your seal on your jelly jar is really good is to lift it up by the lid. So these are all set, as you can see, and they're a beautiful red color. Now depending on what type of rose color you used, it will vary in the color of your jelly. Mine, as you remember, was a dark red, so we have this beautiful red jelly. And then here is the one that I didn't put in the water canner, and my kids broke into it already this morning. So there you go, rose jelly. Hope you enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe, and see you next time. Bye.